back a few years. So I have a question for you concerning that. So as an alternative, what would have happened, what would you expect would have happened if in 2008 Obama had been defeated and the Republicans, well, Senator McCain seems to have befuddled some by some of the economic issues. But this should be a continuation of sort of Bush administration policies of some kind. What would you have expected the decisions, major decisions to have been made in these different areas?
Well, again, I think it would have depended on the composition of Congress. Okay? I think that if we'd had the Democratic Congress and a McCain presidency, in some areas we would have had sort of pretty sensible compromise. Now, Senator McCain is an unusual character. He's got very liberal views on a lot of issues. And my own pop psychology is that Senator McCain likes to be liked. So I'm not sure he would have stood up there and really fought for a consistently sort of small government, perspective. I think he would have compromised kind of right, left, and center because he likes being popular. So I wouldn't have been super optimistic about that particular combination. But there are issues where he certainly would have stuck to his guns. He's certainly not, a big tax increase person. He would have resisted that sort of thing. Whether he would have stood up and tried to really get the entitlements under control, I suspect not. If you have bureaucrats in Washington making decisions about where money is going to get spent, okay, it's not going to involve the thought of a small business owner or a large business owner who says, should I build another factory or not? Okay, should I build a factory in this part of the country or another part of the country, overseas or domestically? They're not going to be thinking through the costs and benefits in the way that you were hinting at. But secondly, I'm sort of confused that if you had 5% more of your revenue that you could keep, that you wouldn't either use that, okay, to consume more stuff, in which case you would tend to be better off and you would be buying goods and services from other parts of the economy, or that you would say, gee, if I have that more cash flow, I can afford to open another branch, another franchise, or add another product, another line of business, and things like that. I guess I would offer that I've heard different suggestions from lots of other people, and that the evidence on what happens when governments cut taxes is that you do get more economic growth, and certainly there are lots of plausible reasons why that makes sense. So I guess we have to leave it at that. Yeah.
Next year we have tax increases coming in, even if Obamacare is not passed. And we also recently had the abolition of welfare reform in 1994. So welfare recipients now can stay on welfare all of their lives if they want. Would you care to forecast what these two things together are going to do to future unemployment over the next few years?
I don't like forecasting anything that has a number and a date in it at the same time. But the change in the welfare, that's certainly going to go in the direction of a higher reported unemployment rate. I don't know that literature well enough to talk about a number. The tax increases, if you take as given the estimates that are out there, they could certainly contribute a percentage point or two to the unemployment rate, okay, given what evidence from people like David and Christy Romer, okay, about how much taxes are bad for the economy. The particular proposals that people were making sort of 5 years ago about what was being called privatizing were not going to address the growth of Social Security benefits, because what those were doing was allowing people to take some of their taxes that they would otherwise pay to the government would go into a Social Security trust fund and say, instead you can put those in a 401k-like account. Well, what effect does that have on the solvency of the trust fund? It makes it worse, because less money is going into the trust fund. Now, if you simultaneously cut the benefits to which that person is entitled by an actuarially equivalent amount, then you haven't changed the solvency of the trust fund. If you cut the benefits of the person who's getting this private account by more, well, then you've improved the solvency, but you didn't need to give them a private account to do that. So the crucial way to privatize Social Security is to pay less benefits. That's the meaningful way to do it. That's the only way which actually makes it more solvent. Now, what I was sort of the devil half of me was hoping and the angel half of me was rooting against was that what would happen is that the Republicans would sell the country privatization as though it were a free lunch, even though it's not for the reasons I explained. But buried in the details on page 3 million of the bill, okay, there would be little tricky fixes to sort of the rate at which benefits were indexed and how things were rounded up versus rounded down. And so those tricks would actually promote solvency, okay, even though the creation of the privates account doesn't promote solvency. But it didn't happen one way or the other. If you took a bunch of identical people who didn't have insurance, who had identical risks, health characteristics, et cetera, and thought about each of them as individually buying insurance, each would have to pay a fairly high premium because there would be a lot of risk for the insurer for any given individual. If you could pool them all together, then you'd be pretty confident that the average amount you'd have to pay out would be some reasonable estimate, and so you could offer a lower premium. So if you were starting with identical people and just diversifying the risk, just like if you flip a coin many, many, many times, you can be pretty confident that the average it's going to come out sort of heads. But the proposals are to force into the same pool people of very different risks. And there will be systematic biases into who is willing to go into the pool and who doesn't. And so we will be forcing people who are currently healthy, paying relatively low premiums, to be in the pool with people who are unhealthy. And so some people will pay higher premiums and some people will pay lower premiums. There's no free lunch from forcing all those people of differing health risks into the same pool. So there's a set of assumptions under which that statement can be made correct, but that's not the scenario that we actually face. Okay, so there's sort of two ways to answer that. If the question is, how could we slow the growth of the existing programs, make the existing programs more efficient? There's an answer that most economists would give. Okay, one, reduce, ideally eliminate, the tax preference for employer-provided health care. And the crucial thing is that because you're in effect being subsidized through your employers, you're going to buy a more generous plan with fewer copays and deductibles, so you're going to demand more health care without thinking about the cost. So economists very broadly would support that. Secondly, introducing more copays and deductibles into Medicare, okay, for the same basic reasons. Okay, and more broadly, you could think about eliminating some of the barriers to entry into practicing medicine, such as allowing a lot more foreign-trained residents and doctors to work in the United States, expanding care and lowering prices and things like that. If the question is, what can you do to provide much greater coverage, much greater access to affordable health insurance, okay, that's a much harder question because they're inevitable trade-offs. So whatever you do is going to have some non-trivial cost. What Paul Ryan has proposed, I think, is as close as you can get to some, is a very good attempt at balancing all those costs and benefits. It says, give everyone a health insurance voucher, just to have a round number, assume it's say $10,000 a person. So every person has $10,000 that they can spend on health insurance, but not on anything else. It's a voucher. Okay? Now, if you do that, okay, some people are going to have health status that's going to require a lot more than can be paid for by that $10,000 a year policy. That $10,000 might buy you a relatively generous policy without much copays and deductibles, or much more generous but with copays and deductibles. But some people are not going to be able to buy all the health care they could possibly want just by getting that $10,000 voucher. So there's still going to be an issue of some people not always getting care paid for, okay, who don't have the ability to pay for it themselves. But there isn't any system that would do that, that would give everybody access to all health care under all circumstances without regard to ability to pay, that would not also destroy the economy. So you have to balance that somewhere. Somebody has to, not get something some of the time. Ryan's proposal of universal vouchers, okay, I think is the least bad of the approaches.